Hi, welcome to Midnight Whisper Stories, where every night hides a new nightmare. I am the creator behind this channel, and every story he is written, designed, and edited by me. I make these tales to give you chills, escape, and a reason to keep the lights on. Stay till the end. You won't believe how this one ends.
Story 1. Tavern in the Tide. I should have known better than to follow a road that does not appear on any map. It was late October when I took that wrong turn off Highway 101, somewhere between Cannon Beach and Astoria. The fog had rolled in thick from the Pacific, swallowing the coastline whole, turning my headlights into two useless beams that barely cut through the gray. I had been driving for 11 hours straight, pushing through exhaustion because I wanted to reach Seattle before midnight. My hands ached on the wheel. My eyes burned. And then I saw it. A weathered sign pointing down an unmarked gravel road. The wood was so old I could barely read the carved letters. The Tide, Rest Tavern. 2 miles. I told myself I just needed coffee. Maybe some food. Stretch my legs for 10 minutes and get back on the highway. That was the plan. The gravel crunched under my tires as I turned onto that narrow road. Towering Douglas firs pressed in from both sides, their branches forming a tunnel overhead. The fog seemed thicker here, almost alive, coiling between the trees like something searching. My GPS had gone dark 3 miles back. No signal, just static and that annoying spinning circle. I should have turned around right then. The road curved down toward the coast, steep and winding. I could smell the ocean now, that heavy salt and kelp scent that meant I was close to the water. And then the trees opened up, and I saw the tavern. It sat alone on a rocky outcrop above the beach. A 2-story building made of weathered wood that looked like it had been standing there since the logging boom of the 1800s. Yellow light glowed in the windows. A crooked sign hung above the door, swaying slightly in the wind even though I felt no breeze. 3 vehicles sat in the gravel lot. A rusted pickup truck, an old sedan covered in moss, and a motorcycle that looked like it had not moved in years. I parked and killed the engine. The silence was immediate and total. No waves crashing despite being maybe 30 yards from the surf. No wind, no birds, just that thick, pressing quiet that makes your ears ring. The moment I stepped out of my car, I felt it. That primitive sensation in your gut that tells you something is fundamentally wrong with a place. The air was too heavy, too still. The tavern loomed above me, and I noticed that the yellow light in the windows did not flicker or move the way normal light does. It was constant, unchanging, like stage lighting. But I was tired, so tired, and I convinced myself I was being paranoid. The door opened with a long creak that sounded too loud in that dead silence. Inside, the tavern looked frozen in time. Dark wood paneling covered the walls. A long bar ran along the left side, bottles lined up behind it that I could not quite focus on. The labels seemed to shift when I looked directly at them. Round tables filled the main room, and in the far corner, a stone fireplace held a fire that burned without any sound. No crackling, no popping, just silent flames. 4 people sat scattered throughout the room. An old man at the bar, hunched over a glass of something dark. A middle-aged woman at a corner table, staring into nothing. 2 men playing cards near the fireplace, their movements slow and mechanical. None of them looked up when I entered. None of them acknowledged my presence at all. Behind the bar stood a woman in a blue dress. She was beautiful in a way that made my throat tighten. Dark hair pulled back, pale skin. Eyes that were too large, too dark, reflecting the firelight in a way that did not seem quite natural. Her dress was old-fashioned, something from the Victorian era maybe, made of deep blue fabric that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She looked directly at me and smiled. Her teeth were too white, too perfect. I approached the bar slowly, my footsteps the only sound in that silent room. The woman did not move, did not blink, just watched me with those enormous dark eyes. I sat on a stool that felt damp even though it looked dry. The wood was cold under my hands. I opened my mouth to ask for coffee, but the woman spoke first. Her voice was soft but clear, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once. From behind me, from the ceiling, from inside my own head. She told me she had been waiting for me, that they do not get many visitors anymore, that I must be so very tired from my long drive. I tried to respond but found my mouth would not form words properly. My tongue felt thick. Heavy. The exhaustion I had been fighting suddenly crashed over me like a wave, and I gripped the bar to keep from sliding off the stool. The woman placed a glass in front of me. I had not seen her move, had not seen her pour anything. But there it was, dark liquid, almost black, with steam rising off the surface in thin spirals. She told me to drink, that it would help me rest. Every instinct I had screamed at me not to touch that glass. But my hand reached for it anyway, moving on its own, and I watched in horror as my fingers wrapped around the cold glass and lifted it toward my lips. That is when I noticed the photographs on the wall behind the bar. They were old, black and white images in cracked frames. Men and women in clothes from different eras, the 1800s, the 1920s, the 60s, all standing in front of this same tavern, all with the same expression on their faces, eyes wide, mouths slightly open, an expression of absolute terror frozen forever on film. And in every single photograph, standing in the background, was the woman in the blue dress. Unchanged, unogging, watching. The glass was inches from my mouth now. The liquid inside smelled like brine and rust and something else I could not identify. Something organic and rotten. I forced my head to turn, to look at the other people in the tavern. The old man at the bar, the woman at the corner table, the two card players by the fire. They still had not moved, had not shifted position even slightly since I walked in. That is when I realized they were not breathing. Their chests did not rise and fall. Their eyes did not blink. They sat there like mannequins, perfectly posed, wearing clothes from different decades, their skin waxy and wrong in the firelight. My hand began to shake, the dark liquid sloshing in the glass. I tried to pull away, tried to set it down, but my body would not obey. The woman in blue was closer now, though I had not seen her move. She was right in front of me, on my side of the bar, and her hand was reaching toward my face with fingers that were too long, too pale, joints bending in ways that joints should not bend. She whispered that I would be happy here, that I would never be tired again, that I would never have to leave, that she takes such good care of her guests, that they stay forever. The glass touched my lips. The liquid was ice cold and burned at the same time. I could feel it beginning to pour into my mouth, that taste of salt and metal and decay, and something inside me finally snapped. I threw myself backward off the stool, the glass shattering on the floor, and I ran. I burst through that door into the night, and the world had changed. The fog was gone. The moon hung huge and bloated in the sky, casting everything in sick silver light. And the beach below the tavern was covered in bones. Thousands of them. Skulls and rib cages and long bones picked clean and white, stretching down to the water, its edge where waves finally crashed and foamed, the sound I should have heard all along. Behind me, the tavern door hung open, that yellow light spilling out. And in the doorway stood the woman in blue, perfectly still, watching me with those two large eyes. I could see her mouth moving, could see her lips forming words, but no sound came out. Or maybe the sound was inside my head, because I heard her clearly despite the distance. She told me I could run, that they all run at first, that it does not matter, that this place does not appear on maps for a reason, that there is no road back to the highway, that I am already where I need to be. I ran for my car, fumbling with my keys, hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice in the gravel. Behind me, I heard footsteps, slow, steady, unhurried, the sound of someone who knows their prey has nowhere to go. I got the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut and jamming the key into the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice, then died. I tried again. Nothing. The dashboard lights flickered and went dark. Through my windshield, I could see the woman in blue standing 10 feet away, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her smile wider now, showing too many teeth. The other figures from the tavern emerged behind her. The old man, the corner woman, the card players, all moving in that same slow, mechanical way, their faces blank, their eyes empty and dead. I locked the doors even though I knew it would not matter, even though I understood with absolute certainty that I was not leaving this place. My phone was in my pocket. I grabbed it with shaking hands. No signal, of course, but the camera still worked. I do not know why I did it. Some desperate need to document what was happening, to leave evidence. I pointed it at the woman in blue and took a photo. In the screen, she appeared different. The beautiful woman was gone. What stood there instead was something ancient and rotting. Her dress was not blue but covered in dark stains. Her skin hung loose on her bones. Her eyes were empty sockets. Her mouth was a black hole lined with broken teeth. She was a corpse that had been pulled from the ocean and dressed up and made to walk and talk and lure people to this place. But when I lowered the phone and looked through the windshield with my own eyes, she was beautiful again. Perfect and smiling. They surrounded my car, pressed their hands against the windows. The glass began to fog from their touch, and in the condensation, words appeared. Backwards letters written from the outside. Welcome home. Stay with us. You are ours now. I screamed then, actually screamed until my throat was raw, and the woman in blue laughed. I heard it clearly even through the closed car, a sound like waves pulling bones across rocks. Then she turned and walked back to the tavern. The others followed. One by one they filed through that open door, back to their positions, back to their eternal vigil. The old man to his stool, the woman to her corner, the card players to their game, and the door swung shut. I sat in that car for hours, maybe all night. Time felt wrong here, stretched and compressed at once. Eventually, gray light began to seep across the sky, though I never saw the sun rise. The bones on the beach slowly faded, sinking into the sand until they vanished completely. The tavern looked almost normal in that pale light, almost welcoming. My car started on the first try. I drove back up that gravel road, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. The road seemed longer than before, much longer. The trees pressed in close, branches scraping the roof of my car. And then suddenly I was back on Highway 101, merging into morning traffic like nothing had happened. I drove straight to Seattle, checked into a hotel, showered for an hour trying to scrub away the feeling of that place. Then I did what any person would do in the modern age. I searched for the Tide, this rest tavern online. I found it. There were articles from historical societies, old newspaper clippings scanned and posted. The tavern had been built in 1872 by a widow named Eliza Marsh. Her husband had drowned in a shipwreck just offshore. She opened the tavern to support herself and her young daughter. But there were stories even then. Travelers who stopped at the tavern and were never seen again. Locals who swore they saw people in the windows late at night who could not possibly be alive. In 1889, a group of men from Astoria went to investigate. They found the tavern empty, tables set, fire burning in the fireplace. But no one there. No Eliza Marsh, no daughter, no guests, just that yellow light in the windows and absolute silence. The tavern burned down in 1893. Supposedly, a grease fire in the kitchen. The building was destroyed completely. Nothing left but the stone foundation. Except I had been there last night. I had stood inside it, had sat at that bar, had almost drunk from that glass. I looked at the photo I had taken on my phone. The image of the woman in blue in her true form, rotting and ancient. But as I stared at it, the photo began to change. The corruption faded, the beauty returned, and in the background, visible through the tavern window behind her, I could see myself. Standing outside, looking in, my face wearing that same expression of terror from all those old photographs. I deleted the photo immediately, threw my phone across the room, but I can still see that image when I close my eyes. Can still see myself standing there, already claimed, already part of the collection. That was 6 weeks ago. I have not driven Highway 101 since then. Have not gone near the Oregon coast. I moved back east to Pennsylvania, as far from that place as I could get. But 3 days ago, I was driving through the mountains outside Pittsburgh. Took a back road to avoid traffic. And I saw it, just for a moment as I rounded a curve. A weathered sign pointing down an unmarked gravel road. The Tide, this rest tavern. 2 miles. I did not take that turn. I kept driving, but now I see the signs everywhere. Different roads, different states. Always the same weathered wood. Always the same carved letters. I think the woman in blue is calling me back. I think she is waiting for me to be tired enough, desperate enough, lost enough to follow one of those signs again. And when I do not think I will be leaving a second time. I still have dreams about that place, about sitting at that bar, about the glass of dark liquid, about the taste of salt and rust and decay. And sometimes, in those dreams, I drink it. I drain the glass, and it tastes like coming home, like finally resting, like never having to run again. I wake up terrified that one night I will not wake up at all. So I have to ask you something, because I need to know if I am losing my mind or if this is real. Have any of you ever seen a sign for the Tide, this rest tavern? Have you ever followed a road that is not on any map? Have you ever met a woman in a blue dress who smiled too wide and promised you could stay forever? Write your answer in the comments, because I need to know if she is calling anyone else, or if she is only calling me. Story 2. Man in the red plaid shirt. I saw him 3 times before I understood what he was. The first time was on the Cascade Ridge Trail, about 40 miles northeast of Seattle. It was early October, and I had gone up there to clear my head after my divorce finalized. The trees were starting to turn, and the fog hung low between the Douglas firs like something alive and breathing. I had been hiking for maybe 2 hours when I noticed him standing off the trail, maybe 30 yards ahead, just watching me. He wore a red plaid flannel shirt, the kind you see in every outdoor store, every thrift shop, every dad's closet in the Pacific Northwest. Nothing special about it, nothing special about him either, at first glance. Middle-aged, dark hair, average build, but something felt wrong. The way he stood there, perfectly still, not moving even as I got closer. Not acknowledging me, just staring into the forest with his back partially turned. I called out a greeting. Hikers always greet each other out there. It is an unspoken rule. He did not respond, did not turn, did not even shift his weight. I felt my pace slow, felt something cold move through my chest. The forest had gone quiet. No birds, no wind, just the sound of my boots on the wet trail and my own breathing. I passed him, gave him a wide berth, kept my eyes forward. When I glanced back, he was gone, completely gone. No movement in the brush, no sound of footsteps, just empty forest where he had been standing seconds before. I told myself it was nothing. A daydreamer, a weird guy. The mountains are full of weird guys. I kept hiking. 3 miles later, I found the body. She was just off the trail, partially hidden by ferns. A woman in her 20s, wearing a purple jacket and good hiking boots. Her eyes were open, staring up through the canopy. No visible wounds, no blood, no signs of violence. She looked like she had just laid down and stopped. Her face was slack, peaceful almost, but her eyes held something else. Something that made my stomach turn. Terror. Pure, frozen terror locked in those dead eyes. I called 911. Waited 2 hours for the rangers to arrive. Gave my statement. They asked if I had seen anyone else on the trail. I almost mentioned the man in the red plaid shirt, but something stopped me. It felt stupid, paranoid. What would I even say? I saw a guy standing in the woods. He did not wave back, so I said no. I had seen no one. That was my first mistake. The second time I saw him was 3 weeks later. Different trail, different mountain. I had started hiking more after finding that woman. I know that sounds insane. Most people would have stayed home, avoided the wilderness, let that image fade. But I could not. Something pulled me back. A need to understand, to process what I had seen. I was on the Twin Falls Trail, a popular route that sees hundreds of hikers every weekend. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the parking lot had been packed. Families with kids, couples holding hands, dogs on leashes, normal people doing normal things. I hiked past all of them, pushing deeper into the trail system, taking the less traveled branches until the voices faded and I was alone again. The sound of the creek filled the silence, rushing and constant. The air smelled like wet earth and cedar. That is when I saw him. Same red plaid shirt, same posture, same impossible stillness. He was standing on a rock outcropping about 50 feet above the trail, looking down at the water. Not at me, never at me directly, but I knew he was aware of me. Could feel it in my bones. My heart started hammering. My hands went cold. I stood there on the trail, frozen, staring up at him. Other hikers passed me, chatting and laughing, completely oblivious. I wanted to point him out, wanted to grab someone and say, "Do you see him? Do you see that man up there?" But I could not make my mouth work. Then he turned his head, slowly, deliberately, and even though he was too far away for me to see his face clearly, I felt his eyes lock onto mine. Felt them crawl over my skin like spiders. I ran. I do not care how it looked. I turned and ran back down that trail like something was chasing me, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my boots slipping on the wet stones. I ran until I reached the crowds again, the families and the dogs and the noise and the safety of other human beings. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for an hour, shaking, trying to convince myself I was losing it. Stress, trauma, PTSD from finding that body. My mind creating patterns where none existed. Then my phone buzzed. A news alert. A hiker had been found dead on the Twin Falls Trail. A man in his 40s. No apparent cause of death. He had been found on the rocks below the outcropping where I had seen the man in the red plaid shirt. I sat there staring at that notification until my phone screen went dark. That night, I started searching. I went deep into online hiking forums, local news archives, search and rescue reports. I was looking for a pattern, looking for proof that I was not insane. And I found it. Over the past 15 years, there had been 47 unexplained deaths on hiking trails in Washington state. Not accidents, Not exposure, not heart attacks, unexplained. Healthy people found dead with no visible cause. Their hearts just stopped. Every single one of them had that same look in their eyes. The rangers and medical examiners had noted it in their reports. Extreme fear, terror beyond reason captured in their final moments. And buried in a few witness statements, mentioned casually, dismissed as irrelevant, were references to a man in a red plaid shirt seen near the locations. Always watching, always still, never speaking. I found a forum post from 2 years ago. A woman describing an encounter almost identical to mine. She had seen him on the Rattlesnake Ledge Trail. Felt unnerved. Hiked out quickly. Later learned a solo hiker had died that same day. Same trail. She asked if anyone else had seen a man matching that description. No one responded. The thread died, but I responded. I sent her a private message. Told her everything. Asked if she was still alive. If she had seen him again. She replied within an hour. Yes, she was still alive. No, she had not seen him again. But her brother had. 2 months after her encounter. He brushed it off when she warned him. Thought she was being paranoid. He saw the man on the Lake Serene Trail. Told her about it that night over the phone. Said the guy gave him the creeps, but he was fine. Probably just some hermit. They found his body the next morning. I sat back from my laptop. My hands numb. The pattern was clear now. He shows himself. You see him. And then someone dies. Either you or someone close to you. The connection was not immediate. Not obvious. But it was there. Like a delayed curse. A mark that cannot be scrubbed away. The third time I saw him was 2 days ago. I had stopped hiking. Of course I had stopped. I stayed in the city. Avoided the trails. Tried to pretend the mountains did not exist. But the feeling followed me. That sensation of being watched. Of something patient and ancient waiting for its moment. I was walking to my car after work. The Seattle drizzle turning the pavement slick and black under the streetlights. The parking garage was mostly empty. My footsteps echoed. I reached my truck, fumbled with my keys, and saw him reflected in my window, standing 20 feet behind me. Red plaid shirt soaked with rain, face still unclear, still somehow blurred even though he was closer than he had ever been. He was not moving, not breathing, just standing there in the fluorescent light of the garage, staring at the back of my head. I spun around. The garage was empty. No one there, just oil stains in concrete and the hum of ventilation fans. But I could still feel him, could feel his eyes on me even though I could not see him. I got in my truck and drove. I did not go home. I drove east, toward the mountains, because some part of me understood what needed to happen. If he had marked me, if I was next, then I was not going to let it happen in the city. Was not going to let some innocent person find my body slumped in my apartment or collapsed on the sidewalk with that same look of terror frozen on my face. I drove until I reached the Cascade Ridge Trail, the same trail where this started. It was late, almost midnight. The parking lot was deserted. The trailhead sign creaked in the wind. I started hiking. My headlamp beam cut through the darkness, catching the eyes of small animals in the underbrush, turning the trees into twisted shadows. I did not care. I kept walking. Deeper into the forest, deeper into whatever was waiting for me. I've been hiking for 6 hours now. The sun is starting to rise, turning the sky that pale gray that comes before dawn. My legs are numb. My water is gone. And I know he is close. Can feel him moving through the trees parallel to me, keeping pace, waiting for the right moment. I do not know what he is. A ghost, a demon, something older that we have no name for. Something that lives in these mountains and feeds on fear. On the moment when the human mind breaks and the heart simply gives up. But I know he is here for me now. I can see him up ahead, standing in the middle of the trail, that red plaid shirt unmistakable even in the dim light. He is facing me this time, waiting, and I am still walking toward him because there is nowhere else to go. No escape, no way to outrun whatever he represents. I'm going to see his face soon. I'm going to understand what he is, and I do not think I'm going to survive it. But if someone finds this, if someone reads these words, then maybe they will understand. Maybe they will see him too, that man in the red plaid shirt standing too still in the wilderness, and they will know to run. To never look back, to warn everyone they love. Because he is real, and he is always watching, and the mountains of the Pacific Northwest hold something that was never meant to be disturbed. I am 50 feet away from him now, 40, 30. I can almost see the details of his face, almost make out the features hidden in shadow all this time. And I realize with absolute certainty that I am about to learn why those dead hikers had such terror in their eyes. So I ask you, listening to this right now, safe in your home or your car or wherever you are, if you saw him, That man in the red plaid shirt standing perfectly still on a trail you were hiking. Would you keep walking? Would you investigate? Or would you run? Tell me in the comments. Because I think your answer matters more than, Story 3. Watcher in the inlet. I stopped believing in coincidences the night I found the photographs in my dead uncle's storage unit. It was late October when I drove up to Bellingham to clear out his things. Uncle Ray had lived alone in a cabin near Chuckanut Drive for 30 years. And when the park ranger found him collapsed on his porch, they said it looked like his heart just gave out. He was 68. No wife, no kids, just me, his only nephew, left to sort through decades of a hermit, his life. The storage facility sat off Guide Meridian, one of those orange-doored places that smell like rust and old cardboard. Unit 47. I had driven 9 hours straight from Sacramento, and my back ached as I rolled up the metal door. Inside, boxes were stacked to the ceiling. Most contained books about local history, nautical charts, and journals filled with his cramped handwriting. I figured I would donate most of it and be back home by the weekend. Then I opened the plastic bin marked personal and saw the photographs. There were hundreds of them, all taken at different times, different seasons, but always the same location. The fjords near Deception Pass. I recognized the dark water and the towering cliffs from childhood visits. But these photos were not tourist snapshots. They were surveillance images. Each one showed the same section of shoreline, taken from what looked like a tripod setup, probably with a telephoto lens. Ray had written dates on the backs in red ink. Some went back 40 years. And in nearly every photograph, standing at the water, its edge or partially obscured by fog, was the same figure. Tall, impossibly thin, no visible face. My hands went cold as I spread the photos across the concrete floor. The figure appeared in different positions but always facing the camera, always perfectly still. In some images it stood waist deep in the inlet. In others it was barely visible through the mist, just a dark silhouette against the gray water. But the posture was always identical. Arms at its sides, head tilted slightly forward, watching. I found Ray's journal beneath the photos. The last entry was dated 3 days before he died. It knows I have been documenting it. Last night I woke to scratching sounds on my bedroom window. I live on the second floor. When I turned on the light, I saw handprints on the glass. The fingers were too long. Too many joints. I am not going back to the inlet. But I do not think it matters anymore. I think it followed me home. The storage unit suddenly felt too quiet, too enclosed. I grabbed the journal and the stack of photos and walked quickly to my truck. The October air bit at my face as I locked the unit and sat in my cab, engine running, trying to process what I had just seen. Ray had been obsessed with something at Deception Pass, something he photographed for 4 decades, and now he was dead. I should have driven home right then. Should have thrown the photos away and forgotten the whole thing. Instead, I drove to Chuckanut Drive. The road twisted along the coastline, flanked by dense forest on one side and sheer drops to the water on the other. Ray's cabin was 10 miles north, a weathered frame tucked into the trees. The key was under the third porch step, exactly where the lawyer said it would be. Inside, everything was as the ranger had left it. Ray's coffee mug still sat on the kitchen table. His reading glasses were folded beside a book about Pacific Northwest indigenous legends. But it was the walls that made my stomach drop. Every surface was covered in maps, photographs, and newspaper clippings. Red string connected different points, creating a web of obsession that covered the entire living room. The photos were all from the inlet, hundreds more than what I had found in storage. And in the center of it all was a large topographical map of Deception Pass with dozens of red X marks along the shoreline. Beneath the map, Ray had written a single sentence in thick black marker. It moves between the fog and the water. It has always been here. I spent 2 hours going through his research. The newspaper clippings were missing persons reports. Hikers, kayakers, fishermen, all vanished near Deception Pass over the last 60 years. Ray had circled each article and noted the date beside the corresponding X on his map. There were 37 cases. He had written, same location, beside most of them. My phone buzzed. My wife calling from Sacramento. I let it go to voicemail. I could not explain what I was looking at, could not put into words the creeping certainty that my uncle had discovered something real, something that had killed him. The sun was setting when I made my decision. I grabbed Ray's camera equipment from the hall closet, loaded it into my truck, and drove to Deception Pass State Park. The ranger station was closed for the season. The parking lot was empty except for a single sedan covered in pollen. I parked near the trailhead and checked Ray's map. The location he had photographed most frequently was a quarter-mile hike along the coastal trail. The forest was silent as I walked. No birds, no wind, just the sound of my boots on wet earth and the distant crash of waves against rock. The trail opened onto a rocky beach, and I recognized it immediately from the photographs. The same jagged cliffs, the same dark inlet that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I set up Rick's tripod exactly where the angles in his photos suggested he had positioned it. The camera was old but functional, a Nikon with a massive telephoto lens. I attached it to the mount and looked through the viewfinder. The inlet stretched before me, maybe 200 yards across. The water was black and still. Fog was beginning to roll in from the strait, thick and low. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. The temperature dropped noticeably, and my breath began to fog. I checked my watch. 6:45. The light was fading fast. That is when I saw it. At first I thought it was a piece of driftwood or a piling. A dark vertical shape near the far shore, barely visible through the gathering mist. But as I adjusted the focus on the camera, my chest tightened. It was not driftwood. The figure stood motionless in the shallow water, 7 feet tall, maybe more. Its body was impossibly narrow, like someone had stretched a human form until it was grotesque. It wore no clothes that I could see, just smooth, dark skin that blended with the water. But it was the head that made my hands shake on the camera. There was no face, no features at all, just a blank expanse where eyes and a mouth should have been. And it was facing directly toward me. I took 3 photos in rapid succession, my heart hammering. Through the viewfinder, I watched as the figure slowly raised one arm and pointed at me. The movement was smooth, deliberate. The arm extended far too long, the joints bending at wrong angles. Then it began to walk toward me through the water. I tore away from the camera and stumbled backward. The figure moved without creating ripples, gliding across the surface as if the water was solid beneath it. It was crossing the inlet, coming directly toward my position. I could hear nothing but my own ragged breathing and the blood pounding in my ears. I ran. The trail back to the parking lot had never seemed so long. Branches tore at my jacket as I crashed through the darkening forest. Behind me, I heard something else moving through the trees. Not footsteps, something heavier, something that broke branches without slowing down. My truck was still alone in the lot. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them, snatched them from the gravel, and threw myself into the cab. I locked the doors and turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I reversed out of the space so fast my tires screamed. As I swung toward the exit, my headlights swept across the trailhead. The figure stood at the forest edge, watching, its arms still extended, pointing. I drove back to the cabin doing 80 on roads meant for 40. I did not stop until I was inside with every door locked and every light blazing. My hands would not stop shaking as I downloaded the photos from Rick's camera onto my laptop. The images were clear, too clear. The figure was even more disturbing in high resolution. Its skin had a texture like wet leather. Its proportions were so wrong they hurt to look at. And in the final photo, the one I took just before running, I could see something I had missed before. There were others behind it in the fog. 5 or 6 more figures, all identical, all standing motionless in the inlet. All watching. I opened Rick's journal again and read his earlier entries. He had first seen the figure as a young man in 1983 while kayaking near the pass. He thought it was a person in distress and paddled closer. When he got within 50 yards, he realized it was not human. It had watched him for 10 minutes before sinking beneath the water without a ripple. Ray had come back the next day with a camera, and the day after that, and for 40 years after that. He had documented it appearing in the same location, always during fog, always at dusk. He had tried to tell people, park rangers, police, local historians, everyone dismissed him as crazy. So he stopped telling people and just kept watching, kept photographing, building his evidence in silence. But something had changed in recent months. The figure had started appearing more frequently. And according to his notes, it had begun to move, to follow him, to appear outside his cabin at night. They are territorial, Ray had written. I think I crossed some invisible boundary by documenting them for so long. I think they have decided I know too much. I see them in my dreams now, always standing at the foot of my bed, always pointing. I wake up and the smell of salt water fills my room even though I am miles from the coast. His final entries were barely legible. Frantic scrawls about hearing scratching sounds, about finding wet footprints in his cabin that led from the front door to his bedroom and then simply stopped. About the feeling of being watched constantly, even with all the curtains drawn. I checked every window in the cabin. They were all locked. But on the sliding glass door that led to the back deck, I found something that made my blood freeze. Handprints, dozens of them, pressed against the glass from outside. The fingers were too long and had too many joints, exactly as Ray had described. They were still wet, fresh. I grabbed my keys and my laptop and ran for my truck. I did not care about the rest of Ray's things. Did not care about securing the cabin. I just needed to get away from Deception Pass, away from whatever was in that inlet. But my truck would not start. The engine turned over once, then nothing. I tried again. Just clicking, I popped the hood and shone my phone, its flashlight, into the engine compartment. Every wire had been cut, sliced clean through as if with a razor. The battery cables were severed. The fuel line was punctured. Someone or something had systematically disabled my vehicle while I was inside. The forest around the cabin was completely silent. I backed toward the cabin door, my phone, its flashlight sweeping the darkness. That is when I saw them, standing between the trees at the edge of the property. 5 figures, perfectly still, all facing the cabin, all with their arms raised, all pointing. I slammed the door and locked it, pushed the couch against it for good measure. The cabin had no landline. My cell phone showed 1 bar of service. I dialed 911. It rang 4 times before a dispatcher answered. 911. What is your emergency? I am at a cabin on Chuckanut Drive and there are people outside. They disabled my truck. I need help. Can you describe these people? Sir. I looked out the window. The figures had moved. They were now standing in the front yard. Closer. I could see them clearly in the porch light. Their blank faces. Their impossible proportions. They are not people, I said. Please just send someone. The dispatcher took the address and promised a unit was on the way. 20 minutes, she said. I locked myself in the upstairs bathroom with a kitchen knife and waited. I could hear sounds below. The scraping of the couch being moved. The crack of the front door splintering. Footsteps on the stairs. Slow, methodical. They were inside. The bathroom door had no lock. I braced myself against it and waited. The footsteps stopped outside. I could see shadows moving under the door gap. Then came the scratching. Fingernails on wood. Slow circles. Patient. I do not know how long I held that door. It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then I heard sirens in the distance. The scratching stopped. The shadows withdrew. By the time the sheriff's deputies kicked in the front door and found me, the figures were gone. They searched the property, found the damaged truck, found the handprints on the glass door, though they were dry now and less distinct. They found the broken front door and the photos on the wall. They took statements and photographs. They treated me like a victim of a breaking and entering. But I could see the skepticism in their eyes when I tried to explain about the figures in the inlet. I stayed in a Bellingham motel that night. The deputies offered to post a car outside, but I declined. I did not sleep, just sat with my laptop, going through every photo Ray had taken. Every journal entry, trying to understand what I was dealing with. In his earliest entries, Ray had theorized they were some undiscovered species. Something that lived in the deep channels and only emerged in fog. But his later writings took a different turn. He had researched indigenous legends of the area and found stories about the Watchers of the Strait, beings that existed between water and air, protectors of the boundary between worlds. The legend said they appeared to those who spent too long observing the liminal spaces, the fog, the tide pools, the deep water, and they were said to follow such people home. I left Washington the next morning in a rental car. I threw away Ray's journals and hard drives in a rest stop dumpster outside Portland. I wanted nothing to do with his research, nothing to tie me to what I had seen. But it did not matter. 3 weeks after I returned to Sacramento, I woke up at 3 in the morning to the smell of salt water. My bedroom window was open, though I had locked it before bed. And on the glass, barely visible in the streetlight, were handprints. They have been appearing every night since. On my windows, on my car. Yesterday I found them on the inside of my bathroom mirror. My wife cannot see them. She thinks the stress of Ray's death is making me paranoid. She wants me to see a therapist. But I know what is happening. I documented them. I have the photos on my laptop as proof. And now, like Ray, I have crossed whatever boundary they protect. They have decided I know too much. Last night I saw one standing in my backyard, just beyond the fence line, perfectly still, watching my bedroom window. When I turned on the outside light, it was gone. But this morning I found wet footprints leading from the fence to my back door. They stopped at the threshold. I think they are testing, seeing how close they can get, building up to something. I am writing this down because I need someone to know what happened to Ray. What is happening to me? He spent 40 years documenting them, and it killed him. I spent one night photographing them, and now they have marked me too. I do not know what they want. I do not know if they are protecting something or claiming something. All I know is that they are real. They exist in the fog and the deep water of the Pacific Northwest. And once they have seen you seeing them, they never stop watching. If you ever visit Deception Pass, if you hike those coastal trails at dusk when the fog rolls in, do not look too closely at the dark shapes in the water. Do not try to photograph them. Do not try to prove they exist. Because if you do, they will follow you home. And unlike me, you might not have time to warn anyone. So tell me, if you found photographs like these in a dead relative's belongings, would you investigate? Or would you walk away? Let me know in the comments below, because I need to know if I am the only one who could not resist looking closer. Story 4. Whispers in the weird. The voices in the dam started 3 weeks before anyone disappeared. I was a maintenance supervisor at the Bonneville Dam on the Columbia River, about 40 miles east of Portland. 22 years on the job, I had seen equipment failures, floods, close calls with the turbines that could pull a man under in seconds. But I had never heard the dam speak before that September. It began with Jenkins. He came up from the lower levels during a routine inspection, his face pale and sweating despite the cold. He said he heard whispering down in the spillway tunnels, voices echoing through the concrete, speaking words he could not quite make out. I told him it was just water pressure, air moving through the pipes. The Columbia pushes 11 million gallons through that dam every hour. It makes noise. But then Ramirez heard it too. Then Chen, then me. I was alone in Tunnel 7 when it happened. The inspection tunnels run deep beneath the dam, narrow concrete passages that follow the water flow. The walls are always damp, always cold, moisture beading on the curved ceiling and dripping down your neck. Your footsteps echo wrong down there. Sounds bounce and stretch until you cannot tell if someone is 10 feet away or 100. I was checking pressure gauges when I heard my name. Not shouted, not called out, whispered, soft and wet and close, like someone was standing right behind me, their mouth inches from my ear. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The tunnel was empty, just concrete and shadow and that constant low rumble of water moving through the dam, was guts. Then I heard it again. My name, but this time it came from ahead of me, from deeper in the tunnel, from the direction of the main turbine chamber. I stood there in that cold, dark passage and felt something I had not felt since childhood. Pure, animal terror, the kind that makes your legs weak and your stomach drop. Because the voice that spoke my name was mine. My own voice, whispered back at me from the darkness. I got out of that tunnel fast, told myself it was acoustics, fatigue, the mind playing tricks in enclosed spaces. But that night I could not sleep. I kept hearing that whisper, kept feeling like something had been waiting for me down there in the dark. Something that knew my name. The next day, the shadows started appearing. Chen saw the first one. He was in the turbine gallery, that massive chamber where the generators spin, each one the size of a house. The noise in there is deafening, a physical force that pounds through your chest and makes your teeth ache. You wear double ear protection and you still feel it in your bones. Chen was doing a visual inspection when he saw movement in his peripheral vision. A figure standing between turbines 3 and 4. He turned, thinking it was another worker, but the figure was wrong. It was darker than any shadow should be, even in that dim industrial light. And it was shaped like a person but moved like smoke, like water, flowing and shifting but maintaining that human outline. He blinked and it was gone. We started comparing notes after that. Ramirez had seen shadows in the control room, Jenkins in the equipment bays, Martinez in the fish ladders. Always in our peripheral vision, always gone when we looked directly at them, and always accompanied by that whispering, those voices speaking just below the threshold of understanding. The dam became a different place. The workers moved in groups now, nobody wanting to be alone in those deep concrete passages. People started calling in sick. The atmosphere changed. There was a tension in the air, a feeling of being watched that never went away. Management brought in consultants. They tested for carbon monoxide, for toxic mold, for infrasound that could cause hallucinations. They found nothing. The dam was functioning perfectly. All readings normal. They suggested stress, suggested we take time off, suggested it was all in our heads. But then the recordings started appearing. The dam has security cameras everywhere, dozens of them, covering every major area, recording 24 hours a day. Someone started finding footage that should not exist. Short clips, never more than a few seconds, buried in the archived files. Footage from cameras that had been offline for years. Footage timestamped from dates before the dam was even built. The clips all showed the same thing. Workers in the dam, people we did not recognize wearing uniforms from different eras. Men in clothes from the 1930s when the dam was under construction. Technicians in 70s-style workwear. Engineers in 90s safety gear. All of them staring directly at the camera with expressions of absolute terror. And behind each of them, visible over their shoulders, were the shadows. Dozens of them, crowding around the workers like they were being surrounded. I watched one clip over and over. A man in 30s-era work clothes standing in what looked like Tunnel 7. The same tunnel where I had heard my name. He was mouthing something, speaking directly to the camera, but there was no audio. His eyes were wide and wet. He was crying, and the shadows behind him were reaching forward, their dark forms extending toward him like arms. The clip ended with his mouth forming a word. Just one word, over and over. Out, 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 out. I started researching the dam, its history. Started digging through old newspapers and construction records. What I found made my blood run cold. 96 men died building Bonneville Dam between 1933 and 1937. They drowned in the river. They fell from scaffolding. They were crushed by equipment. They were buried in concrete pours before anyone could pull them out. The Columbia took them and the dam kept their bodies. But those were just the official deaths. The ones recorded and documented. There were rumors of others. Men who went into the tunnels during night shifts and never came out. Workers who walked into the river and kept walking. Maintenance crews in the 50s and 70s who vanished during routine inspections. The dam had always been hungry. I found an interview in a 1968 newspaper. A former worker talking about his time at Bonneville. He said the dam had moods. Said you could feel it angry some days. Feel it pulling at you, wanting you to come deeper, go further into its concrete heart. He said he heard voices in the tunnels. Said he saw his dead brother standing in the turbine chamber, beckoning him closer to the spinning blades. He quit after 6 months. Said he would rather be unemployed than spend another day in that place. The whispering got worse. It was constant now, audible even in the main offices above ground. A soft susurrus that seemed to come from the walls themselves. People started hearing words, their names, the names of family members. Instructions whispered in voices that sounded familiar but wrong. Come down, come see, come deeper. Then Martinez vanished. He had been working a late shift, doing pressure checks in the lower tunnels. His radio went dead around midnight. We found his equipment belt in Tunnel 12, about 50 feet from the main turbine chamber. His tools were laid out in a perfect line on the concrete floor. His flashlight was standing upright, still on, the beam pointing at the ceiling. But Martinez was gone. We searched for 3 days. Police, rescue teams, dogs. We went through every inch of accessible tunnel, every chamber, every maintenance passage. Nothing. He had simply ceased to exist. That was when I decided to go back into Tunnel 7, back to where I had heard my name, because I had a theory, and it was making me sick to think about. I went alone at night, told no one, just took my flashlight and walked down into the cold dark beneath the dam. The whispering started immediately. It was louder now, clearer. I could almost make out words. And underneath it, I heard something else. A wet sound, like breathing, like something massive and alive drawing breath in the darkness. I walked deeper into Tunnel 7, following it down toward the turbine chamber. The walls seemed to press in. The air grew thick and damp. My flashlight beam seemed weaker, like the darkness was drinking the light. Then I saw them. The shadows were not shadows at all. They were gaps, absences, places where reality had been worn thin by decades of death and fear and desperation. And through those gaps, I could see the other side, the place where the missing workers had gone. It was not another tunnel. It was not another room. It was the dam itself, the inside of the dam, the negative space between the concrete, filled with black water and the bodies of everyone who had ever been taken. They floated there in that impossible space, preserved perfectly, their eyes open and staring, their mouths forming words I could not hear. And they were all reaching out, toward me, toward the gap, trying to pull themselves back through. I understood then, the dam was not haunted. The dam was a threshold. The massive structure, the weight of the concrete, the pressure of the water, the electrical fields from the generators, all of it had created something. A thin place, a weak point between what is and what should not be. And every person who died here, every worker who fell or drowned or vanished, they did not die. They slipped through. They were trapped in that black water space inside the dam, pressed between worlds, neither alive nor dead. and they wanted out. The whispering exploded into a roar. Every voice at once, screaming my name, begging me to help them, threatening me, promising me, all of those words pouring into my head until I thought my skull would split. The gaps widened. The shadows stretched toward me, and I saw hands reaching out, fingers pale and waterlogged, grabbing at the air. I ran. I dropped my flashlight and I ran through that tunnel in total darkness, my hands scraping the walls, my feet splashing through puddles, the screaming voices chasing me. I felt something brush my shoulder, felt cold fingers grab my collar, but I kept running until I burst out into the main facility, into the light, into the world of the living. I quit the next day, walked out, did not even collect my last paycheck. And I was not the only one. Half the maintenance crew left within a week. The dam is still running, still generating power for the region, but they cannot keep workers anymore. People last a month, maybe 2, before they hear the whispers, before they see the gaps, before they understand what they are really standing on top of. I heard Martinez turned up 3 weeks ago. They found him in his apartment in Portland, 40 miles from the dam. He was sitting on his couch, had been dead for days, but his eyes were open and his mouth was stretched wide like he had been screaming. And his skin was cold and damp like he had just been pulled from the river. The coroner said he drowned, said his lungs were full of water, but there was no water in his apartment. No tub, no sink left running, just Martinez, drowned on dry land, still staring at something the rest of us cannot see. I do not go near the Columbia River anymore. Do not drive past any dams, because sometimes, late at night, I still hear the whispering. I hear my name spoken in my own voice. And I know they are still down there, in that black water space between worlds, waiting for the gaps to widen just a little more. So let me ask you something. Have you ever worked in a dam? Have you ever been deep underground in a tunnel or a basement or a mine and heard voices you could not explain? Have you ever seen shadows that moved wrong, that looked almost human but not quite? Write your answer in the comments, because I need to know if the thin places are spreading, if the gaps are opening wider, if what happened at Bonneville is happening somewhere else. I need to know if they are reaching through. Story 5. Thing in the tunnel breathes. I know how that sounds. I know you are thinking I am crazy or making this up for attention. But I felt it. The air moving in and out of that darkness like lungs expanding and contracting. Warm air pushing out when it should have been cold. A rhythm that had nothing to do with wind or ventilation or any logical explanation. The Snoqualmie Tunnel sits abandoned in the Cascade Mountains, about an hour east of Seattle. 2.3 miles of pure darkness cutting straight through the mountain. It was built in 1914 for the railroad, used for decades, then forgotten when they rerouted the tracks. Now it is part of a hiking trail, the Iron Horse Trail. People walk through it every day during summer. Families with kids, couples on dates. Nobody thinks twice about it, but nobody goes in during winter, and nobody goes in alone after dark. I did both. I am a civil engineer, was hired by the State Parks Department to assess structural integrity of several old railway tunnels for potential renovation. Standard work, boring work, the kind of job where you spend 3 hours taking measurements and photos, then 3 weeks writing reports nobody reads. I had done a dozen of these inspections. Nothing ever happens. The Snoqualmie Tunnel was supposed to be my last site before Bedtime. I got there late, around 4 in the afternoon. November in Washington means the sun sets early, and by the time I parked and gathered my equipment, the light was already fading. The eastern entrance yawned open in front of me, a perfect circle of absolute black against the gray mountain face. I had my headlamp, my laser measure, my camera, everything I needed. The tunnel was straight. I could see the pinpoint of light at the western exit, 2.3 miles away, like a distant star. I started walking. The temperature dropped immediately. That made sense. Tunnels are always cooler than the outside air. But this felt different. It felt deliberate, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. My breath came out in clouds. The beam of my headlamp caught moisture on the walls, made them glisten like wet skin. My footsteps echoed. Each step repeated itself a dozen times, bouncing off the curved ceiling, stretching into the darkness ahead and behind. I tried to walk quietly, could not say why, just an instinct, a feeling that I should not announce myself. I was maybe half a mile in when I noticed the graffiti. The walls near both entrances are covered in it. Tags and names and crude drawings. Normal vandalism. But deeper in, where fewer people venture, the graffiti changed. The messages became warnings. Turn back. Do not go further. It watches. Simple phrases spray painted in shaking letters. Some looked old, faded by years of moisture. Others looked recent, fresh paint still dripping down the stone. One message was different, written in what looked like charcoal or burned wood. The letters uneven and desperate. "It knows you were here." I stopped walking. My headlamp beam swept across those words. I felt my skin prickle, felt something shift in the quality of the darkness ahead, like it had thickened somehow. "Become aware." I told myself it was just urban legend nonsense. Bored teenagers trying to scare people. Every old tunnel has stories. Every abandoned place attracts ghost hunters and thrill seekers making up tales. I had a job to do. I kept walking. That is when I felt it for the first time. That breathing, that impossible rhythm in the air pressure. Warm air moving past my face in a gentle exhalation, then pulling back in, drawing the cold air deeper into the tunnel. In and out, steady as a heartbeat. I stopped again, held my breath, tried to logic it out. Maybe there was a ventilation system I did not know about. Maybe the temperature differential between the two ends created air currents. Maybe my ears were playing tricks in the absolute silence. But I could feel it on my skin, could feel the warmth of each exhalation. Smell something in it. Something organic, like breath from a mouth, like something living. My hands were shaking when I raised my camera. I started taking photos of the wall structure, trying to focus on my work, trying to ignore the sensation crawling up my spine. The flash created harsh shadows, made the tunnel look like a throat, made the curved walls look like they were contracting. I was 3/4 of a mile in when my headlamp flickered. Just once, just a brief dimming and return. But in that split second of reduced light, I saw something move in the darkness ahead. Something that was not my shadow. Something large shifting against the far wall, pulling back from my light like it had been caught reaching toward me. My heart slammed against my ribs. I spun around, pointing my headlamp back the way I had come. The eastern entrance was still visible, a gray circle of twilight, maybe 20 minutes of walking. I could leave, should leave. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I am not a coward. I have never been a coward, and I had a job to complete. I took a long breath, steadied myself, and turned back toward the western exit. The pinpoint of light at the far end seemed dimmer now, further away, like the tunnel had grown longer while I was not paying attention. I kept walking, faster now, my footsteps echoing louder, the breathing around me intensifying. Warm air pushed at my back, then pulled at my chest. In and out, the rhythm matching my own panic breathing. Like it was synchronizing with me, learning me. I started noticing the scratch marks. They covered the walls at regular intervals. Deep gouges in the stone. Not graffiti, not carved with tools. These were claw marks, the kind you would see from an animal trying to dig through rock, trying to escape, or trying to get in. Some of the marks were old, smoothed by decades of moisture. Others looked fresh, sharp edges still visible in my headlamp beam. I reached out to touch one. The stone was warm, almost hot, like something had been scraping at it recently, like something had been generating heat through friction. That is when I heard it, a sound from deeper in the tunnel. Not ahead of me, not behind me, from inside the walls. A scraping, a sliding, like something massive moving through spaces that should not exist. Moving parallel to me, keeping pace. I ran. I do not care how it sounds. Professional engineer or not, I ran. My equipment bag bounced against my hip. My headlamp beam jerked and swayed, creating wild shadows that looked like reaching hands. The breathing intensified. The exhalations became stronger, pushing at my back like hands trying to slow me down. I could hear it now. Really hear it. Not just the scraping in the walls, but something else. A sound like rocks grinding together, like bones cracking, like a voice trying to form words from materials never meant for speech. And then my headlamp went out. Complete darkness. The kind of black that makes you forget what light looks like. The kind that presses against your eyeballs and makes you see things that are not there. Except I knew what I was seeing was there. I could feel it, could sense its massive presence blocking the tunnel ahead of me. Could smell it. That same organic smell from the breathing. Wet earth and old meat and something else. Something that had no comparison in my experience. I fumbled for my phone. My hands numb with terror. The screen lit up. Weak light but enough to see. It was 10 feet in front of me. I cannot describe it properly. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. It was too large for the tunnel. Should not have fit in that space. But it did. It filled the passage from floor to ceiling, from wall to wall. A shape that hurt to look at. Angles that should not connect. A surface that was stone and flesh and darkness all at once. And it had eyes. Dozens of them. Hundreds maybe. Small points of light scattered across its surface like stars. All of them focused on me. all of them blinking in perfect synchronization with that terrible breathing. My phone slipped from my hands, clattered on the ground. The screen cracked but stayed lit, pointing sideways, illuminating the wall. And in that angled light, I saw the truth written in more of that desperate charcoal scrawl. Words I had missed on my way in. Words that made my blood freeze. It was never a tunnel. It is a throat. I do not remember running. Do not remember how I got out. My next clear memory is sitting in my truck in the parking lot. The sun fully set, my hands bleeding from where I had scraped them against the walls in my blind panic. My headlamp was gone. My equipment bag was gone. My phone screen shattered. But I was out. I was alive. I filed my report the next day. Recommended immediate closure pending structural assessment. Claimed I had found significant instability and potential collapse risks. They accepted it without question. The tunnel was closed within a week. Barricaded at both ends. Warning signs posted. But I have been checking the news. Watching. And I see the reports. Hikers who ignore the barricades. Who slip past the fencing because they want to experience the tunnel. Because they do not believe the warnings. Some make it through. Some do not. The ones who do not are found days later at one entrance or the other, wandering in circles, talking about the breathing, about the eyes, about something that lives in the mountain and only pretends to be stone. The ones who make it through are changed. I can see it in their interview videos online. Something hollow in their eyes. Something missing, like they left part of themselves in that darkness. Like the thing in the tunnel kept a piece of them as payment for passage. I think about it every day, about what I saw, about what it wanted, about the fact that it let me go. And I wonder if that was mercy or if it just was not hungry. If it feeds on fear or flesh or something else entirely. Something we do not have a name for. I wonder if it is still breathing in there. Still waiting in the dark. Still watching the pinpoint of light at each entrance. Patient and ancient and hungry. And I wonder if it remembers me. If it marked me somehow during those few seconds when we occupied the same space. If I left something behind in that darkness. Something it can use to find me. Because sometimes, late at night, I feel it. That rhythm, that breathing, warm air on the back of my neck when I am alone. The sensation of being watched from impossible angles. And I know that the tunnel might be closed, but what lives inside it is not contained. Cannot be contained. It knows where I am now. It knows what I saw. And I think it is waiting to see what I will do with that knowledge. So I am asking you, whoever is listening to this, if you have been in that tunnel, if you have felt that presence, tell me in the comments. Tell me I am not crazy. Tell me what you saw. Because I need to know if others have survived. If others remember. Or if I am the only one left who knows the truth about what sleeps beneath the mountains of Washington State. Story 6. Thing that followed me from Coos Bay. The scratches on my front door appeared 3 days after I ran over something on Highway 101. I was driving back from a security equipment installation job in Coos Bay, Oregon. It was past midnight, and the coastal highway was empty except for the fog that rolled in thick from the Pacific. My headlights barely cut through it. I had the radio on low, some late-night talk show I was not really listening to, when something darted across the road. I slammed the brakes, felt the sickening thump under my right front tire. My truck lurched to a stop halfway into the opposite lane. My heart was hammering as I put it in park and grabbed my flashlight from the center console. I expected to find a deer, maybe a large dog, something that would explain the weight of the impact. But when I walked back to check, there was nothing on the road. No blood, no fur, no body, just 3 deep gouges in the asphalt that looked like claw marks. They started at the fog line and dragged across both lanes before disappearing into the darkness beyond my flashlight beam. Each groove was at least 2 inches deep, carved into the pavement like something had dug in while being hit. I stood there in the fog, my breath visible in the October cold, and felt the first real spike of unease. Whatever I had hit was strong enough to gouge asphalt, and it had walked away, or crawled away. I searched the shoulder with my flashlight but found nothing except more of those scratches leading into the dense coastal forest. The trees were so thick I could not see more than 10 feet in. The fog made everything look like it was moving. I called out once, asking if anyone was hurt, but my voice just died in the mist. No echo, no response. I should have called the police. Reported hitting something. But what would I say? I hit an animal that carved trenches in the highway and vanished? They would think I was drunk. So I got back in my truck and drove the remaining 40 miles home to Roseburg. I kept checking my rearview mirror the entire way. The road behind me stayed empty. The scratches on my door were 5 feet off the ground. 4 parallel gouges, each about 6 inches long. that had torn through the paint and into the wood underneath. They were fresh. I could see splinters still hanging from the wounds in the door. My porch camera should have caught whoever did this, but when I checked the footage, there was nothing. Just 8 hours of an empty porch, and then, at exactly 3 in the morning, 2 minutes of pure static. When the picture came back, the scratches were there. I called the police. They took a report and said it was probably kids with a garden rake. But I had seen enough claw marks in my life to know these were not made by any tool. The spacing was wrong. The depth was inconsistent, like whatever made them had joints that bent at odd angles. And there was something else. A smell, faint but distinct, like stagnant pond water and rotting fish. That same smell had filled my truck cab the morning after I hit whatever was on Highway 101. I started researching, spent hours online looking for animal attacks in the area, strange sightings, anything that might explain what I had hit. That is when I found the forum posts about the Coos Bay creature. Dozens of reports going back 30 years. People described seeing something near the marshlands south of the bay. Something that walked upright but was not human. 7 feet tall, covered in dark scales or wet skin. Eyes that reflected light like an alligator. Most people called it a hoax. A local legend kept alive by teenagers and tourists looking for thrills. But then I found the property damage reports. Over a dozen cases in Coos County where people claimed something had destroyed their sheds, garages, and vehicles after they encountered the creature. Deep scratches, torn metal, broken windows. In every case, the victim said they had seen it on the road first, had driven past it, or, in 3 cases, hit it with their cars. One post, from a trucker named Dale, made my skin crawl. He had hit something on 101 near Coos Bay in 2017. Never found a body. 3 days later, his rig was found in a truck stop with the entire driver's side peeled open like a sardine can. Dale was never heard from again. The police ruled it a theft. The insurance company refused to pay out, claiming evidence of animal activity. But Dale, his brother, maintained that whatever Dale hit on that highway had followed him and taken him. The word curse appeared in multiple threads. People claimed that hitting the creature marked you, that it would follow you home, that it would destroy everything you owned before it finally came for you. I told myself it was nonsense, urban legend garbage. But I also installed 3 more cameras around my house and started sleeping with a baseball bat next to my bed. The second incident happened 5 days later. I woke up to my truck alarm screaming at 4 in the morning. I ran outside in my boxers and a t-shirt to find all 4 of my tires shredded. Not slashed, shredded, like something with massive claws had grabbed them and twisted until the rubber tore apart. The wheel wells were scratched to hell, deep gouges in the metal that went through to the frame. But it was the hood that made me back away slowly. Something had left a handprint, or what looked like a handprint if hands had 5 fingers that were each 10 inches long and tipped with claws. The impression was pressed into the metal so deep I could see the outline of scales or rough skin in the dents. My neighbor, old Mr. Patterson, came out in his bathrobe to see what the noise was about. He took one look at my truck and went pale, said he had seen something in his backyard around 3, something big moving past his fence. He thought it was a bear at first, but bears did not move like that. Did not walk on 2 legs like a man, but hunched forward like they were about to drop to all 4s. The police came again, took more photos, filed another report, suggested I had enemies or maybe owed someone money. They did not want to hear about the Coos Bay creature or curses or anything that did not fit their narrative of human vandalism. But I saw the way the younger cop looked at those claw marks. Saw him take pictures with his personal phone after his partner went back to the patrol car. He knew this was not normal. I called my insurance company. They sent an adjuster who took one look at the damage and said it appeared consistent with animal activity. Black bear, probably. But his hands shook as he took measurements of those handprints, and he was gone in under 20 minutes. My claim was denied 2 days later. Insufficient coverage for wildlife damage. I stopped sleeping, started researching obsessively, found more accounts of the creature. One story from a woman named Sarah who had swerved to avoid it on the highway in 2012. She said it had stood in the middle of her lane, easily 7 feet tall, with elongated arms and a head that was wrong somehow. Too narrow, too angular. She clipped it with her mirror. The next week, something tore the siding off her house. The week after that, her dog disappeared. She moved 3 states away and claimed it stopped. But she also said she still smelled that swamp rot smell whenever she was alone at night. The scratches appeared on my bedroom window on day 12. I woke up to the sound of scraping. Slow, deliberate, metal on glass. I grabbed the bat and crept to the window, pulled back the curtain. Nothing, just darkness and my reflection. but on the outside of the glass were fresh scratches. 4 parallel lines dragged across the entire width of the window, and in the dirt below, pressed into my flower bed, were footprints. They were human-shaped but wrong. Too long, too narrow. The toes were tipped with deep impressions where claws had dug in. Each print was at least 16 inches long. Whatever made them had walked right up to my window, scratched the glass, and then walked away into the night. I left that night, packed a bag and drove to my brother, whose place in Salem. Did not tell him why I was there, just said I needed a few days away. I thought distance might help. Thought maybe if I left Roseburg, whatever was hunting me would lose interest. I was wrong. On my 3rd night in Salem, I woke up to my brother shaking me. His face was white. Someone or something had torn the screen door off his back porch and left it in the yard. His security camera caught 2 seconds of footage before it went dead. 2 seconds of something large and dark moving past the lens. Something with reflective eyes that glowed yellow-green in the infrared light. That smell was everywhere. In the house, on the porch, that rotting fish and stagnant water smell. I told my brother everything. About hitting something on Highway 101. About the damage to my property. About the creature and the curse. He did not believe me, but he also did not tell me to leave. Just said we should both go to the police. File a report about a prowler. But I knew it would not matter. This thing had followed me 90 miles north. It had found me in a different city. A different house. The police could not stop something that did not officially exist. I spent the next week in motels. Never stayed in the same place twice. Paid cash. Did not tell anyone where I was going. But it found me every time. Scratches on the door. That smell in the hallway. Other guests complaining about strange noises in the night. One motel manager found footprints outside my window. Called me a freak and kicked me out. I went back to the forums. Posted my story. Asked for help. Most people said I was lying or crazy. But one user, someone with the handle Swamp Watcher, sent me a private message. They said they had encountered the creature in Coos Bay 20 years ago. Had hit it with their van while making a delivery. It had followed them for 3 months. Destroyed their vehicle, their garage, their marriage. They said the only way they survived was by going back to where they hid it and leaving an offering. An offering of what? I asked. They never replied. I drove back to Coos Bay yesterday. Found the exact spot on Highway 101 where I hit the creature. The claw marks were still visible in the asphalt, though weathered now. I stood there in the afternoon sun, no fog this time, and felt utterly alone. The forest on both sides of the road was silent. No birds, no insects, just that oppressive quiet that makes your ears ring. I did not know what to offer. Did not know what a creature like this would want. So I left everything. My wallet, my watch, even my truck keys. I placed them in the center of those claw marks and backed away slowly. Then I started walking north along the highway. I did not look back. I am writing this from a library computer in Florence, Oregon. I have been here for 6 hours. Too afraid to leave. Too afraid to find out if the offering worked. My phone has been buzzing nonstop with calls from my insurance company and my brother. But I have not answered. Because I can smell it again. That swamp rot smell. It is faint, but it is here in this library. Getting stronger. The librarian keeps looking at me strangely. I think she smells it too. I do not know if leaving the offering changed anything. I do not know if this curse can be broken or if I just bought myself a few more days. All I know is that I hit something on Highway 101 that should not exist, and now it has marked me as its property. If you ever see something standing in the road late at night near Coos Bay, do not stop. Do not swerve. Just close your eyes and pray you miss it. Because if you hit it, if you feel that impact and hear those claws scraping asphalt, your life is already over. It is just a matter of time. So tell me, would you go back and leave an offering like I did? Or would you just keep running? Drop your answer in the comments, because I need to know if I made the right choice or if I just made things worse. Story 7. Lights of the Lost Mines. The lights in the Cascades do not behave like any lights should. I learned this the hard way last August when I went looking for my brother in the mountains east of Eugene. He had been missing for 6 days. The search and rescue teams had given up after 4, said the wilderness had swallowed him, said it happens more than people think in those dense Oregon forests. But I knew my brother. He was an experienced hiker, former Army Ranger. He did not just get lost and die. His last text message to me said he had found it. Just those 3 words. He had found it. Then nothing. I knew what he meant. For 2 years, my brother had been obsessed with the lost miner, S. Cash, an old legend from the gold rush days. Supposedly, a prospector named Jacob Weir struck it rich somewhere in the Cascade foothills in 1864. Found a vein of gold so pure you could scratch it with your fingernail. But Weir never made it back to civilization. Searchers found his camp 6 months later. His tent was still standing. His supplies were untouched. But Weir was gone, and so was any trace of where he had been mining. The legend says he left clues. Markers carved into trees, rock cairns, and lights. Strange lights that appear in the forest at night, floating between the trees, leading the way to the hidden mine. Dozens of people have gone looking for it over the decades. Some came back empty-handed. Others never came back at all. My brother believed he had cracked the code. He had old maps, survey records. He spent months researching, planning his route. And then he went into those mountains alone. I started where the search teams had found his truck, parked at a trailhead near Cougar Reservoir. His camping gear was gone. His GPS unit was missing. But he had left his phone in the glove compartment, and when I checked it, I found photos. Dozens of them, pictures of trees with strange symbols carved into the bark, stacks of rocks arranged in patterns, and in the last photo, taken at dusk, I saw them. The lights, they appeared as soft blue orbs floating about 6 feet off the ground, strung out in a line that disappeared into the dark trees. There were maybe a dozen of them visible in the photo. They did not look like flashlights or lanterns. They looked organic somehow, alive, like deep-sea creatures glowing in the forest darkness. My brother had found what he was looking for, and then he had vanished. I packed light, 3 days of food, water filtration, a good tent, 2 flashlights and extra batteries. I told myself I would hike in, follow his route based on the GPS data I pulled from his truck, his navigation system, find some trace of him, then get out and call the professionals. Simple, safe, reasonable. I should have known better. The trail climbed steadily into old-growth forest. Douglas firs 6 feet across. Western red cedars that had been standing there for 500 years. The canopy was so thick that even at noon, the forest floor was dim and cool. Everything was covered in moss. The air smelled like decomposition and growth happening at the same time. That rich, wet earth smell that fills your lungs. I found the first carved tree after about 4 miles. The symbol matched the ones in my brother's photos. It looked like a compass rose, but wrong. The directions were off. North pointed somewhere that was not quite north. The carving was old, weathered, but I could still make out the lines cut deep into the bark. That was when I noticed the silence. The forest had gone completely quiet. No birds, no insects, no wind moving through the branches. Just absolute, suffocating silence that made my ears ring. I kept walking, found more carved trees, found rock cairns that were definitely not natural. Stones balanced in ways that would take time and intention. I was following a trail that someone had marked over a century ago. And with each marker I found, the silence grew heavier, thicker, like the air itself was holding its breath. The sun was setting when I saw my first light. It appeared suddenly, maybe 30 yards ahead, floating between 2 massive firs. A soft blue glow that pulsed gently, like breathing. I stopped dead on the trail and just stared at it. The light did not move, did not flicker. It just hung there in the growing darkness, waiting. I turned on my flashlight and pointed it at the glowing orb. My beam passed right through it without disturbing it at all. The light continued to pulse, serene and patient. Then, slowly, it began to drift deeper into the forest. Away from the trail, into the thick underbrush where no path existed. Every instinct told me not to follow. But this was what my brother had seen. This was what had led him somewhere he never came back from. If I wanted answers, I had to follow the lights. I stepped off the trail and pushed into the undergrowth. Immediately, I felt the temperature drop. The air became damp and cold, clinging to my skin. The blue light drifted ahead of me, always staying just at the edge of my vision, always moving deeper into the forest. Then a second light appeared, then a third. They formed a line, a glowing path through the darkness, and I followed them like a man in a dream. Branches scraped my face. My boots sank into soft earth. I had no idea how far I had gone or what direction I was heading. The lights were all that mattered. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the lights stopped. They formed a circle in a small clearing I had somehow stumbled into. The trees here were different. Older, twisted. Their bark was black and slick with moisture. And in the center of the clearing was a hole. Not a cave, not a mine shaft, just a hole in the ground, perfectly circular, about 4 feet across, disappearing down into absolute darkness. The edges were lined with flat stones that had been carefully placed. Someone had built this, had shaped this entrance, and the blue lights hovered around it like sentries. I approached the edge carefully and pointed my flashlight down. The beam penetrated maybe 15 feet before the darkness swallowed it completely. I could not see the bottom, could not hear anything echoing back. The hole just dropped away into nothing. That was when I smelled it. A wet, mineral smell. Not unpleasant, almost sweet, like cold stone and underground water and something else I could not identify. The smell seemed to reach up from the hole, curling around me, filling my lungs. I knew I should leave, knew I should mark this location and come back with help. But I also knew my brother had been here, had stood exactly where I was standing, had made a choice. I found his backpack 10 feet from the hole, partially hidden under a fallen branch. It was soaked through with moisture, covered in moss, like it had been there for months instead of days. I opened it with shaking hands. His supplies were still inside. His sleeping bag, his camp stove, everything he would need to survive. Everything except him. At the bottom of the pack, I found his journal. The pages were damp but readable. The last entry was dated 6 days ago, the same day he sent me that text. His handwriting was rushed, excited. He described finding the lights, following them, discovering the hole. He wrote that he could hear something down there. Music, he said, like wind chimes made of glass, beautiful and strange and calling to him. He wrote that he was going down, that he could see a glow at the bottom, that he finally understood what Jacob Weir had found. Not gold, something better, something that had been waiting here for 150 years. The journal entry ended mid-sentence. The last word was just a scrawl, like his hand had jerked away from the page. I looked back at the hole. The blue lights pulsed brighter now, more insistent. And I realized I could hear it too. That sound my brother had described, like glass chimes in a breeze that did not exist. Musical and clear and coming from deep underground. Part of me wanted to climb down, wanted to see what my brother had seen. The urge was almost overwhelming, a physical pull in my chest, like something was tugging at my ribs from the inside. The smell from the hole grew stronger, sweeter, and my head felt light. Dizzy, I forced myself to step back, to turn away from the hole, and that was when I saw them. The trees around the clearing were covered in names, hundreds of them, carved into the black bark at chest height. Names and dates going back over a century. Jacob Weir, 1864. Thomas Crane, 1872. Sarah McMahon, 1908. The names went on, covering every tree, some carved so deeply they had scarred the wood, others barely visible, weathered by time. And near the bottom, recent, fresh cuts in the bark. My brother's name. His handwriting, the date from 6 days ago. He had carved his name before he went down, like everyone else who had found this place, like it was a guest book for the damned. The blue lights began to move. They broke from their circle and started drifting toward me, surrounding me, and in their glow, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The lights were not floating. They were attached to something. Thin, translucent tendrils extended from each orb, disappearing down into the hole. The lights were not guides. They were lures, bait dangling from something that lived in the darkness below. I ran. I crashed through the underbrush, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly, branches whipping my face. Behind me, I heard movement, not footsteps, something sliding, something wet and massive pulling itself through the undergrowth. And that sound, those glass chimes, louder now, closer, no longer beautiful, hungry. I do not know how I found my way back to the trail. Blind luck, pure panic, but suddenly I was on the path, my legs pumping, my lungs burning, running downhill toward the trailhead. The lights followed me. I could see them through the trees, pacing me, dozens of them now, a constellation of blue fire tracking my flight. I made it to my truck as the sun was rising. Did not stop, did not look back. I drove straight out of those mountains and have not been back since. The official story is that my brother died of exposure, that he got lost and succumbed to the elements. They never found his body. Probably never will. The forest is too big, too deep, and searchers do not go looking where the lights appear. But I know the truth. I know what is down in that hole. I know what has been taking people for over 150 years. Something old, something patient, something that uses light to lure us down into the dark. And I know my brother is still there, still alive in some way I cannot comprehend. Because 3 weeks ago, I got a text message from his phone. His phone that he had left in his truck. His phone that I saw sitting in the glove compartment. The message just said, "Come back. It is beautiful down here. You have to see it." I blocked the number, changed my own, moved to Arizona where there are no deep forests, no old mines, no legends about lights in the darkness. But sometimes, late at night, I see a blue glow outside my window. Just for a second, just long enough to make my heart stop. So I need to ask you something. Have you ever seen strange lights in the wilderness? Glowing orbs that do not behave like any natural phenomenon? Have you ever felt called to follow something into the dark? Write your answer in the comments, because I need to know if this is just Oregon, or if the lights are appearing in other places, if the holes are opening wider, if whatever is down there is getting hungry enough to spread. Story 8. Midnight meeting on Marysville Road. I picked her up 3 times before I realized she was already dead. The first time was last March. I was driving home from a late shift at the Boeing plant in Everett, heading north on Marysville Road toward Arlington. It was just past midnight. The kind of night where the fog rolls in thick from Puget Sound and turns your headlights into useless smears of yellow against the gray. The road was empty, nothing but darkness and trees pressing in on both sides. That is when I saw her standing on the shoulder. A young woman in a white dress, her thumb out, her face turned toward my approaching headlights. Something about the scene felt wrong immediately. The dress was too thin for March in Washington, too formal, like something you would wear to a wedding or a funeral. And she was barefoot. I could see her pale feet on the wet asphalt as I slowed down. Every instinct told me to keep driving. But I have daughters, 2 of them, and the thought of them stranded on a dark road with cars passing them by made my chest tight. So I pulled over, unlocked the passenger door, watched her walk toward my truck through the side mirror. She moved strangely, not limping or stumbling. Just off somehow, her steps were too smooth, too gliding, like her feet were not quite making full contact with the ground. When she opened the door, the interior light showed me her face. Mid-20s, maybe. Dark hair plastered to her skull from the rain. Skin so pale it looked gray. But her eyes were the worst part. Flat, empty, like looking into the eyes of a mannequin. She got in without thanking me. Without saying anything, just sat down and stared straight ahead through the windshield. The smell hit me immediately. Wet earth. Decay. That sickly sweet odor that makes your stomach turn. I cracked my window, told myself she had been walking through the woods, had gotten mud on her clothes. I asked where she was headed. She did not answer, did not even acknowledge I had spoken, just kept staring forward with those dead eyes. I felt the temperature in the cab drop, saw my breath start fogging, my hands tightened on the steering wheel. I drove for maybe 2 miles. The silence was crushing. The only sound was the wipers scraping across the windshield and the hum of the engine. I kept glancing at her from the corner of my eye. She had not moved, had not blinked, just sat there like a statue, like something pretending to be human but not quite getting it right. Then I reached the old railroad crossing just south of Arlington, the one they closed down 15 years ago. And she spoke. Her voice was wrong, too hollow, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. She said to let her out here, said this was where she needed to be. I pulled over. She opened the door and stepped out into the fog. I watched her walk toward the abandoned crossing, her white dress glowing in my taillights. She stopped at the rusted railway barrier, turned back to look at me, and smiled. It was the most terrible thing I have ever seen. A smile that split her face too wide. A smile that showed too many teeth. Then she was gone. Not walked away, not faded into the fog. Just gone. 1 second there, the next second empty road. I sat there for 10 minutes, my heart hammering, my hands shaking. Then I drove home, told myself it was exhaustion, stress, my mind playing tricks after a 12-hour shift. I did not tell my wife, did not tell anyone, just tried to forget. The second time was in July. Different circumstances. I was driving the same route, same time of night, but this time I was wide awake. Alert. It had been months since that March night. I had almost convinced myself it was a dream. Then I saw her again. Same spot, same white dress, same thumb out, same impossible stillness. My foot hit the brake before my brain could process what I was seeing. This could not be real. Could not be the same woman in the same place 4 months later. But it was. I recognized the dress, the posture, the way she stood too perfectly still. This time I did not stop. I accelerated past her, watched her in my rearview mirror. She turned her head to follow my truck, turned it too far, at an angle that would have snapped a normal person's neck. Then she smiled that terrible smile, and started walking, not after me, toward the railroad crossing. I got home and went straight to my computer, started searching. Marysville Road, accidents, deaths, missing persons. I dug through old news articles, police reports, local history forums. And I found it. Her name was Sarah Kellerman, 24 years old, March 19th, 1998. She had been driving home from her engagement party. Never made it. They found her car wrapped around a tree at the old railroad crossing. But they never found her body. Search teams looked for weeks. Nothing. She had vanished. The case went cold. Her parents put up a memorial at the crash site. Fresh flowers every March 19th for years until they both passed away. I stared at her photo on the missing persons report. Same face, same dark hair, same empty eyes even in the picture. Like she had been hollow long before she died. The third time was last week. And this time was different. I had been avoiding Marysville Road for months, taking the long way home, adding 20 minutes to my commute. But last Tuesday my daughter called. Emergency. Her car broke down on Highway 2. She needed a ride home. The fastest route was Marysville Road. I left at 11:45. Told myself it would be fine. Told myself she only appeared at midnight. I would be through before then. I was doing 70, pushing 80 on the straight stretches. The clock on my dash read 11:58 when I reached her spot. She was standing in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes. My truck fished ill at. The abs kicked in, grinding and pulsing under my foot. I stopped 3 feet from her. She had not moved, had not flinched, just stood there in my headlights, that white dress glowing, her arms at her sides. And this time I saw the truth, saw what she really was. The headlights showed me everything. The dress was not white. It was covered in dried blood, brown stains across the chest and stomach. Her feet were not just bare. They were wrong, twisted at angles feet should not twist, broken. And her face, God, her face was caved in on the left side, the skull crushed, dark hollow where her eyes should have been. She started walking toward my truck. That same gliding motion, that same too smooth gait. My hand was on the gear shift, ready to throw it in reverse, when she raised one arm and pointed. Not at me, past me, at my back seat. I looked, could not help it, and there in my rearview mirror, sitting in the back seat of my truck, was a man. Middle-aged, wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, his face slack, his eyes as empty as hers. I screamed, spun around. The back seat was empty. When I looked forward again, she was pressed against my windshield. Her ruined face inches from mine, only the glass between us, her one remaining eye staring into me. Through me, her mouth opened, impossibly wide, and she exhaled, a long breath that fogged my windshield from the outside. When the fog cleared, there were words written in it, backwards from my perspective but perfectly clear. You were there. My blood turned to ice. My mind raced back to March 19th, 1998. I would have been 26, driving this same road, coming home from my buddy's house after watching the game. And yes, I remembered seeing a car in my rearview mirror, a small sedan, driving too fast, swerving slightly. I remembered watching it take the curve at the railroad crossing too sharp. Remembered seeing it leave the road. Remembered the sound of impact echoing through the trees. And I remembered not stopping. Remembered convincing myself someone else would call it in. Remembered going home and sleeping fine because I had not been involved. Had not been the one driving drunk or reckless. Had not been responsible. But I could have stopped. Could have called 911 immediately instead of the next morning when I saw it on the news. Could have saved her if she had still been alive in those first minutes. Could have found her body if she had been thrown clear. She had been there, in the dark, alone, dying or already dead, and I had driven away. The windshield shattered, not cracked, exploded inward in a shower of glass. I threw my arms up, felt shards cut into my skin. When I looked again, she was inside the truck, sitting in the passenger seat, her head tilted at that broken angle, her mouth still open in that impossible stretch. She reached out and put her cold hand on mine. Her skin felt like wet clay, like something that had been underground for decades. And she pulled, not physically, she pulled at something inside me, at something essential. I felt it being drawn out through my chest, felt myself becoming hollow, empty, just like her. My vision blurred. The world turned gray. I could feel my heart slowing, my breath becoming shallow. She was taking it, taking whatever makes a person, payment for what I had denied her, for the help I had refused, for the 26 years she had spent trapped on this road, waiting for the guilty to pass by. Then headlights, bright and sudden, a truck coming from the other direction. It blazed past, horn blaring. The sound broke whatever hold she had on me. I gasped, sucked in air, felt that terrible pulling sensation stop. When I looked at the passenger seat, she was gone. But the glass was still shattered. The cuts on my arms were still bleeding. And written in the condensation on what remained of my windshield were 3 more words. Others were there. I drove home with the wind screaming through my broken windshield. Called in sick the next day. Spent hours searching through old reports again. The accident investigation. Witness statements. Timeline reconstruction. And I found them. 4 other vehicles that had passed through that intersection between 11:40 and midnight on March 19th, 1998. 4 other drivers who might have seen, might have helped, might have saved her. I found their names, started checking. 2 moved out of state years ago. 1 died of a heart attack in 2012. The 4th, a woman named Patricia Vance, still lives in Arlington. I called her. Did not explain why. Just asked if she ever drove Marysville Road at night. If she had ever seen anything strange. She hung up on me. But before she did, I heard it in her voice. That same terror. That same guilt. She had seen Sarah too. I do not drive Marysville Road anymore. I take the long way. Every time. I do not care if it adds an hour. But I know it does not matter. She found me once. She can find me again. And next time there might not be another car to break her grip. Next time she might finish what she started. Because the thing about ghost stories is they always focus on the ghost. On why the spirit is trapped. On what wrong needs righting. But nobody talks about the people who trapped them there. The ones who drove past. The ones who did nothing. The ones who carry that guilt like a weight around their necks for the rest of their lives. Sarah Kellerman is not haunting Marysville Road because she died there. She is haunting it because we left her there. Because in those final moments when she needed help, when someone could have made a difference, we all chose to keep driving. And now she makes sure we never forget. So I'm asking you, have you ever driven past an accident and not stopped? Seen someone who needed help and convinced yourself someone else would handle it? Because if you have, and if you ever find yourself on a dark road in Washington State at midnight, watch for a woman in a white dress. Watch for that impossible smile. And understand that some debts can never be paid. Some guilt can never be washed away. Tell me in the comments if you have ever seen her. If you have ever felt that pull. Because I need to know how many of us there are. How many of us are marked? How many of us are waiting for her to finish what she started? Story 9. Deep thing in Puget Sound, the fisherman's body washed up, missing everything below the rib cage. And that is when I knew my father had been telling the truth all along. First, I'm a marine biologist. I deal in facts, data, and peer-reviewed research. For 30 years, I dismissed my father as stories about something massive living in the deep waters of Puget Sound as the ramblings of an old commercial fisherman who spent too much time alone on his boat. But when they pulled what was left of Marcus Chen from the water near Vashon Island, I saw the bite radius. I saw the pressure markings on the bones. And I knew that no known predator in these waters could have done that. My father drowned himself 3 months before Marcus died, tied cinder blocks to his ankles and walked into the Sound off his dock in Gig Harbor. He left a note that said only, "It knows I have been watching. It is coming for everyone who has seen it." I'm sorry. The police called it a suicide brought on by dementia. I called it a tragedy and tried to move on. But then Marcus died, and I started asking questions that nobody wanted to answer. Marcus had been a kayaker, an experienced one. He went out every morning at dawn to paddle the calm waters between Seattle and the islands. The Coast Guard found his kayak 4 miles from where they found his body. The kayak was intact. No damage, just empty, with his paddle still strapped to the deck. But when they pulled it from the water, there were suction marks on the hull. Dozens of them, each one nearly 6 inches in diameter. I requested the autopsy report through a former colleague at the university. It took 3 weeks and a bottle of decent scotch, but I finally got to see what the medical examiner had actually written before the official report was sanitized. The original notes described trauma inconsistent with any known marine animal in the Pacific Northwest. The bite pattern suggested something with a beak-like structure, similar to a giant squid. But the jaw strength required to sever a human body at the torso would indicate a creature at least 40 feet in length. Giant squid do not live in Puget Sound. The water is too shallow, too warm, too trafficked. But something had killed Marcus Chen, and that same something had terrified my father so badly that he chose death over waiting for it to come for him. I started going through my father's belongings. His house had been sitting empty since his death, and I had been avoiding the task of clearing it out. But now I needed to know what he had seen, what he had been watching. His office was a shrine to his obsession. Every wall was covered in charts of Puget Sound, with dozens of locations marked in red ink. Dates scrawled beside each mark going back 15 years. I found his logbooks stacked on his desk, dozens of them, each one filled with sighting reports written in his careful handwriting. The entries all described the same thing, a massive dark shape moving underwater, sometimes near the surface, creating a wake that had no visible source. Sometimes deeper, visible only as a shadow that blocked out the light filtering down from above. My father had first seen it in 2009 while pulling crab pots near Point Defiance. He described it as being at least 50 feet long, moving with a smooth, undulating motion that was not like any whale or fish. But it was the later entries that made my hands shake. My father had not been the only one watching. He had been part of a network. Other fishermen, divers, ferry workers, people who spent their lives on or under the water. They had been documenting sightings and sharing information through encrypted emails and burner phones. They called themselves the Watchers. And according to my father's notes, something had started hunting them. In 2022, a ferry worker named Tom Patterson disappeared while doing a routine inspection of the Bainbridge Island terminal. Security footage showed him walking to the end of the dock and then simply stepping off into the water. His body was never found. In 2023, a commercial diver named Lisa Rodriguez vanished during a hull inspection in Elliott Bay. Her safety line was found severed. Not cut, severed, like something had grabbed her and pulled with enough force to snap a steel cable. And now Marcus Chen and my father. I found the email address my father had used to communicate with the other Watchers. Send a message identifying myself and asking to meet. I got 3 responses. The first was from a man named David who said he was getting out, moving to Arizona, and suggested I do the same. The second was from someone who called himself Sailor and said they would meet me at the Edgewater Hotel bar at 8 that night. The third was a photograph. No message, just an image taken from underwater looking up at the hull of a boat. And beneath the boat, barely visible in the murky water, was something massive. Something with a shape that made my brain hurt to process. Too many angles, too smooth, like looking at a submarine designed by someone who had never seen one. I met Sailor at the bar. She was in her 60s, weathered and hard, with the look of someone who had spent their life working the water. She did not waste time with pleasantries, just slid a waterproof case across the table and told me that if I was smart, I would throw it in the nearest dumpster and forget everything my father had told me. But I am not smart. I opened the case. Inside were dozens of photographs and a small digital recorder. Sailor told me the photos had been taken by different Watchers over the past decade. All showed the same thing from different angles. A creature that should not exist. Something that moved through Puget Sound like it owned the place. Something that had figured out that people were watching it and had decided to do something about that. The recording was from my father. He had made it 2 days before he died. His voice was steady but tired. He said the creature had started coming to his dock at night. He could hear it moving in the water below his house. Could feel the vibrations through the pilings. One night he shined a spotlight down and saw it just beneath the surface. It had been staring up at him with eyes that reflected the light. Eyes that he said were as big as dinner plates and filled with an intelligence that made him feel like prey. He said he knew it would come for him soon. That it had already taken the others who had seen it most often. He said drowning himself was a mercy compared to what the creature would do. He apologized to me for leaving this burden. And then he said something that made me drop the recorder. He said it communicates, not with sounds or gestures, but through dreams. Everyone who sees it starts having the same nightmares. Dark water, pressure, the feeling of being pulled down into depths that should not exist in Puget Sound. He said the nightmares always end the same way, with you looking up at the surface and seeing your own body floating above you, separated at the waist, trailing clouds of blood into the current. I had been having those dreams for 2 weeks. Sailor saw the recognition in my face, told me I was already marked, that the creature had selected me as its next target. She said the only way to survive was to leave, get as far from the sound as possible and never come back. She had been planning to leave herself, had a truck packed and ready, but she wanted to warn me first because she owed my father that much. I asked her what it was, this thing in the sound. She said nobody knew for certain. Some thought it was a relic from the last ice age, trapped in the deep channels when the glaciers melted. Others believed it was something that came from the ocean and adapted to the brackish waters. A few, including my father, thought it was older than that. Something that had always been here. Something that indigenous peoples had known about and feared long before European settlement. But what everyone agreed on was that it was territorial. It tolerated the boats and the ferries and the normal traffic of the Sound. But people who studied it, who documented it, who truly saw it, became threats. And it eliminated threats. I spent the next 3 days trying to convince myself to leave, to pack up and drive east and never look back. But I could not. My father had died for this. Marcus Chen had died. All the others. Someone needed to prove it existed. To warn people, to make sure their deaths meant something. So I chartered a boat, told the captain I needed to take water samples near the deep channel between Vashon and Tacoma. He was suspicious, but the money was good. We went out at dawn, when the sound was calm and the ferry traffic was light. I had borrowed underwater cameras from my lab, mounted them on a weighted rig, and lowered them into the water at the coordinates where my father had reported his most frequent sightings. The water clarity was poor, typical for the sound, but at 200 feet, just before we reached the bottom, the camera caught something. A shadow moving across the frame. Too big to be a seal. Too fast to be a whale. The captain saw it on the monitor and went pale. Started pulling up the rig immediately. Said we needed to leave. Now. But I made him wait. Made him lower the cameras again. This time I watched the monitor myself, my heart hammering as the rig descended. At 150 feet, something moved in the peripheral of the frame. At 175, I saw it clearly for 3 seconds. A body that was serpentine but impossibly thick. Skin that was dark and textured like stone. And a head that turned toward the camera with eyes that reflected the LED lights. Then the feed went dead. The captain tried to pull up the rig, but the line went slack. When we finally retrieved it, the camera housing was crushed flat. Not cracked or broken, crushed, like it had been subjected to pressure that should not exist at that depth. The captain refused my money and told me to never contact him again. Burned rubber getting back to the dock. I did not blame him. I had seen enough. The creature was real. My father had been right. And now it knew I was looking for it. The dreams got worse that night. I woke up 3 times gasping for air, my sheets soaked with sweat. Each time, the nightmare was more vivid, the feeling of cold water filling my lungs, the pressure building in my skull, and always that moment of looking up and seeing my own severed body floating above me. I started sleeping with the lights on, started checking the water outside my apartment dock compulsively. I live on a houseboat in Lake Union, nowhere near the sound, but I kept thinking about what Sailor had said, that it eliminates threats, that it comes for people who truly see it. On the 7th night after my boat trip, I woke to the smell of salt water. My bedroom was dry, but the smell was overwhelming, and I could hear something moving in the water beneath my floor. Something large. The whole structure swayed slightly, like something massive was rubbing against the pilings. I grabbed my phone and ran. Did not pack. Did not take anything except my keys and my wallet. Just sprinted down the dock to my car and drove. I made it to the highway before I looked back and saw water pouring over the sides of my houseboat. Saw it tilting, sinking. I am writing this from a motel in Spokane, 300 miles from the sound. I have been here for 2 days, and the dreams have stopped. But I know it is not over, because this morning I found something on my car. Suction marks, dozens of them, on the hood, the roof, the trunk, each one exactly 6 inches in diameter. Still wet. I do not know how it followed me here. Do not know if it can survive in fresh water or if there is more than one. All I know is that my father was right to drown himself. That Marcus Chen never had a chance. That something ancient and massive lives in Puget Sound, and it does not want to be found. If you live near the sound, if you spend time on the water, do not look too closely at the shadows moving beneath the surface. Do not try to prove it exists, because once it knows you have seen it, once you become a threat, distance does not matter. It will find you, and what it does to you will make drowning look like mercy. So here's my question. Would you investigate if you saw something massive moving in water where it should not be? Or would you look away and pretend you saw nothing? Tell me in the comments, because I need to know if I made the right choice or if I should have just looked away. Story 10. Blood on the barn floor. The stain on the barn floor was shaped exactly like a human body, and no amount of scrubbing would make it disappear. I bought the property outside Salem, Oregon in March of last year. 30 acres in the Willamette Valley. An old farmhouse that needed work. A massive red barn from the 1920s that leaned slightly to the east but had good bones. The realtor had been eager to close. Too eager. The price was half what comparable properties were going for. I thought I was getting a steal. I should have asked why. The first time I entered the barn, I noticed the stain immediately. It was on the wooden floor near the back, about 20 feet from the main doors. Dark brown, almost black in places, roughly 6 feet long and 3 feet wide at the shoulders, tapering down to where feet would be. The outline of a person lying on their back. I asked the realtor about it. She said it was probably old motor oil, that the previous owners had done vehicle repairs in the barn. Made sense. Old farms always had stains and marks from decades of use. I did not think about it again until I moved in. That first night, I heard the screaming. It woke me at 2:15 in the morning. A woman's voice, raw and desperate, coming from the direction of the barn. I grabbed my phone and a baseball bat and ran outside in my pajamas. The barn doors were closed. The padlock was secure. I circled the building. Nothing. No one. Just the sound of wind through the poplar trees and my own rapid breathing. I convinced myself it was an animal, a fox or a coyote. They can sound disturbingly human. I went back to bed but did not sleep. The screaming came again the next night. Same time, same desperate pitch. This time I was ready. I had my phone set to record. I captured 30 seconds of audio before the sound cut off abruptly. In the morning, I played it back. The scream was definitely human, definitely female, and underneath it, I could hear other sounds. Rhythmic thuds, like something heavy hitting wood, like someone kicking. I called the sheriff's department. A deputy came out that afternoon. Young guy, probably mid-20s. I played him the recording. He listened with a blank expression, then asked if I had checked for homeless people camping on my property. Said sometimes transients would squat in abandoned buildings. I told him the barn was locked. He shrugged. Said animals make weird noises at night. Said I would get used to it. He was useless. But he did say something that stuck with me. As he was leaving, he paused by his patrol car and looked back at the barn. He said he grew up in Salem. Said every kid in the area knew about the Whitmore property. Said there were stories. I asked what kind of stories. He just shook his head and told me to sleep with my windows closed. Said it would muffle the sounds. That night, I researched the property history, found the previous owners. The Whitmore family had owned the land since 1953. Harold and Margaret Whitmore. They raised dairy cows and grew hay. Had 2 children, a normal farming family. They sold the property in 2018 to a developer who planned to subdivide it. The developer went bankrupt before breaking ground. The property sat empty for 4 years before I bought it. But there was a gap in the records. Something that happened in 1976 that made the local news but was never fully resolved. I found a newspaper article from the Salem Statesman Journal dated October 19, 1976. The headline read, "Local woman missing. Foul play suspected." The article described how a 23-year-old woman named Angela Reeves had disappeared after visiting a farm outside Salem. She had been working as a traveling veterinary assistant. Her truck was found abandoned on Whitmore property. The driver's door was open. Her medical bag was on the seat. But Angela was gone. Police searched the farm, interviewed the Whitmores, found nothing. No body, no evidence of violence, no clear explanation for what had happened. The case went cold within months. Angela Reeves was declared legally dead in 1983. Her family never got answers. The article mentioned that police had been particularly interested in the barn. That cadaver dogs had alerted on a section of the floor near the back of the building. But when investigators examined the area, they found only old stains that could have been anything. Animal blood, motor oil, wood stain. Without a body, they had no case. I felt sick reading that article. I knew exactly which stain they meant. The human-shaped outline, the dark brown mark that looked like someone had bled out on the wooden floor. I went to the barn with a flashlight that night, stood over the stain and really looked at it for the first time. The shape was too perfect, too deliberate, and when I knelt down and touched the wood, it was cold. Unnaturally cold, like the boards themselves were frozen despite the mild spring air. I started scraping at the stain with a paint scraper. The wood came up in thin curls, but underneath each layer, the dark color remained. I scrubbed with bleach, with paint thinner, with industrial degreaser. Nothing worked. The stain went deeper than it should, deeper than any liquid should penetrate, like it had soaked into the molecular structure of the wood itself. That was when I noticed the scratches. Deep gouges in the floorboards around the stain, 4 parallel lines on each side, like someone had been dragging their fingernails across the wood, clawing, fighting. The scratches were worn smooth from age but unmistakable once I saw them. Angela Reeves had died here, right here on this spot, and something about her death had marked this place permanently. The screaming continued every night, always at 2:15, always lasting about 30 seconds, always ending with that abrupt cutoff like someone had covered her mouth or she had lost consciousness. I stopped sleeping, started staying up until 3 in the morning just to get through the worst of it. But the screams were not the worst part. The worst part was the cold spots. I would be working in the barn during the day, organizing tools or sweeping out decades of dust. And I would walk through pockets of frigid air, zones where the temperature dropped 30 degrees in an instant. These spots moved, would be in one corner in the morning and a different area by afternoon. Like something was pacing, restless, trapped. I felt watched constantly, would turn around expecting to see someone standing behind me, would catch movement in my peripheral vision, shadows that were not cast by anything. Once, I saw a handprint appear on the dusty window. Small hand. Female. The fingers pressed against the glass from the inside even though I was alone in the barn. I tried to leave, packed my truck, started driving toward Portland, made it 15 miles before I had to pull over. The guilt was crushing, physical, like someone was sitting on my chest. A voice in my head, not my own, begging me not to leave her there alone. Not to abandon her like everyone else had. I turned around and drove back to the property. That night, I started researching Angela Reeves beyond the newspaper article. Found her obituary. Found an interview with her sister from 2009. The sister said Angela had been afraid in the weeks before she disappeared. Had mentioned a farmer who made her uncomfortable. Who would watch her work. Who had asked her inappropriate questions. But Angela needed the job. Needed the money. So she kept going back. The sister said Angela had called her the morning of October 18, 1976. Had said she had one more farm call to make. That she was heading to the Whitmore property to check on a sick calf. That she would call when she was done. She never called. I found Harold Whitmore's obituary. He had died in 2003. Heart attack. No mention of the unsolved disappearance. No indication that he had ever been considered a serious suspect. Margaret had died in 2016. Dementia. She had spent her final years in a care facility, rambling about a girl in the barn. About blood that would not wash away. About screaming that never stopped. The staff thought she was confused. Hallucinating. But she was not confused. She was haunted. I decided to dig. If Angela's body was here, if she had been killed in this barn and buried on this property, she deserved to be found. Deserved to be returned to her family. Deserved peace. I started in the barn. Used a metal detector to search for anything buried beneath the floor. Found nothing. Expanded my search to the surrounding area. The old livestock pens. The overgrown fields. Anywhere someone might hide a body. On the fourth day, I found something near the tree line. A depression in the ground. About 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, covered in moss and ferns but clearly artificial. Someone had dug here and refilled the hole decades ago. I called the police. This time, I got a detective. Older man named Carson who had been on the force since the 80s. He knew about Angela Reeves. Had been a rookie deputy when she disappeared. He brought a team with ground-penetrating radar. They found her in 3 hours, 6 feet down, wrapped in a tarp. Her skeleton was still intact. Still wearing the veterinary assistant uniform she had on when she vanished. Still clutching her medical bag. The forensic analysis showed she had been struck repeatedly on the back of the head. Blunt force trauma. Then she had been stabbed multiple times in the barn, which explained the blood. The amount of it, the desperate violence. They estimated she had survived for several minutes after the initial attack. Had tried to fight. Had clawed at the floor. Had screamed. Harold Whitmore was dead. Could not be prosecuted. But the evidence was clear enough. Angela had probably witnessed something she should not have seen. Or rejected his advances. Or simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. And he had killed her. Had dumped her body in the woods and told everyone she had never arrived. Had lived in that house with that barn for 27 more years, knowing what he had done. Angela's sister came to Oregon when they released the remains. She was in her 70s now. Had waited 47 years for answers. She thanked me. Said her family could finally have closure. Said Angela could finally rest. But Angela did not rest. The screaming continued. The cold spots remained. If anything, it got worse. Like finding her body had somehow strengthened her presence, given her more energy, more anger. I hired a spiritual medium, an older Native American woman who worked with local tribes. She walked through the barn without me telling her anything. Stopped at the stain, said something had died here with unfinished business. That the violence had been so extreme it had torn a hole. Left an imprint. She said Angela was still here because she was still dying. That moment, that violence, was playing on loop. Forever, she experienced it over and over. 2:15 in the morning. The same time Harold Whitmore had killed her. The medium said there was nothing I could do to make her leave. That places where extreme violence occurs are never really clean again. That the energy soaks in like blood into wood. That Angela would scream in this barn until the building collapsed or burned down. That was just how it worked. She suggested I sell the property. Suggested I tell the next buyer what happened. Give him a choice. But she also said no one who knew would ever stay. That this land was marked now. That Angela's death had poisoned it. I tried burning sage, tried prayers, tried everything people suggested online. Nothing worked. The screaming continued, every single night. 2:15, 30 seconds of pure terror. Then silence. I still live here. I do not know why. Maybe guilt, maybe obligation, Maybe because I am the only person who acknowledges what happened, who bears witness to Angela's suffering. The barn is too dangerous to use now. The cold spots have damaged the structure. Wood rot where none should be. Nails pulling loose. The building is dying from the inside. I have accepted that I will hear her scream every night for as long as I live here. That I will walk through pockets of freezing air. That I will see shadows and handprints and movement that should not exist. I am the current keeper of her trauma. The latest person bound to this place by her unfinished death. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder what Harold Whitmore heard. Did he hear her too? Every night for 27 years? Did the screaming drive him mad? Did his heart attack come from decades of guilt and terror? Or was he so devoid of conscience that he slept soundly while Angela relived her murder 12 feet from his bedroom window? I will never know. But I hope he heard her. I hope she haunted him every single night. I hope he died knowing there was no forgiveness. No escape. That what he did in that barn would echo forever in wood and blood and screaming that never ends. So I need to ask you something. If you bought a property and discovered something terrible had happened there, something that left a permanent mark, would you stay? Would you try to honor the victim by bearing witness to their suffering? Or would you sell immediately and let someone else deal with the haunting? Would you feel obligated to tell buyers the truth even if it meant never selling? Or would you keep silent and pass the horror on? Write your answer in the comments, because I think about leaving every day. But I also think about Angela alone in this barn for 4 more decades with no one acknowledging what happened to her. And I do not know which choice is right. I just know that at 2:15 tomorrow morning, she will scream again. And I will listen, because someone has to.
Thank you for visiting to Midnight Whisper Stories. I am the creator of this channel, where every dark story is designed to help you escape the noise of the day and immerse yourself in worlds that spark your imagination. I write every script, design every image, hear voice actors to bring my stories to life, and edit everything myself. So sit back, relax, and let the whispers of the night guide you.